The National Day coincided precisely with the 5th anniversary of my marriage to my wife, Shen Xue-ning. Previously, we had made an appointment to set off for the Aegean Sea together during this holiday. However, on the early morning of the day we were supposed to depart, Shen Xue-ning was packing her luggage in a hurry and said to me, "The company has arranged a business trip for me temporarily." I believed her words at that time. It was not until late at night that I scrolled across an updated Moments post by my wife's first love, Song Rin. In the photo, the two of them were snuggling affectionately, their fingers intertwined, and the couple's bracelets were extremely eye-catching. I couldn't help but give a bitter smile. After all, she had gone to the Aegean Sea, yet the person accompanying her was not me, her husband who had made the agreement with her. Instead of calling to question her, I just calmly liked the post. 1 minute later, Shen Xue-ning nervously dialed my phone and explained, "This is just a misunderstanding. We happened to meet during the business trip. We will definitely make it up to you next National Day." I gave a disdainful smile and said, "It's okay. Wish you a pleasant trip." Shen Xue-ning looked at me in astonishment and asked, "Why aren't you jealous this time?" By the time Shen Xue-ning returned home again, a week had already passed. When she pushed open the door, dragging a large suitcase, in the past, I would surely take the initiative to step forward quickly, take the suitcase from her, and also thoughtfully change her slippers for her. But this time, I didn't take any action. Leaning against the door, Shen Xue-ning frowned and looked at me, asking, "Fu Yan, where are my slippers?" In the past, every time she came home, I would arrange her slippers neatly in advance, but this time, there was no sign of the slippers in front of the shoe cabinet. Sitting on the sofa, my eyes fixed on the TV motionless, I replied, "In the shoe cabinet. You can look for them yourself." Upon hearing this, Shen Xue-ning frowned even more tightly. However, after a moment of hesitation, her brows slowly relaxed. She took out the slippers from the shoe cabinet by herself, put them on, walked up to me, looked at the empty dining table, and pouted, saying, "I'm a bit hungry. Cook me a bowl of wontons." On ordinary days, as long as she said she was hungry, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, I would immediately get up to cook noodles for her. But today I just dumbonda said, "I'm busy. Order takeout by yourself." A flash of annoyance appeared on Shen Xue-ning's face. She sighed, and then immediately moved closer to me, softening her tone. "Honey, I know that the sudden business trip made you angry. I apologize. It won't happen again next time. I brought you a gift on purpose. Forgive me this time, okay?" I still didn't look sideways and said in a calm tone, "You're overthinking. I'm not angry." Shen Xue-ning was stunned for a moment, and couldn't help frowning again. She took out a shabbily wrapped gift from the suitcase. After unwrapping it, it was a tie. Shen Xue-ning looked at me expectantly and said, "See if you like it. I chose it especially for you." I remembered a Moments post that Song Rin had made 3 days ago. There was a top-up event for the opening of a shopping mall during the National Day. A tie would be given for a top-up of yuan. At this moment, the blue and green tie in Shen Xue-ning's hand was exactly that top-up gift, yet she had presented it to me as a carefully selected gift. I didn't show my dissatisfaction on the spot. I accepted the gift and said lightly, "Thank you. You put in a lot of effort." Seeing that I didn't say anything more, Shen Xue-ning was a bit surprised and asked, "Just that?" I gave a soft and counter asked, "What else do you want to hear?" Shen Xue-ning wrinkled her brows and started to explain, holding my hand, "Are you still angry? I explained it to you that day, Song Rin, and I really just happened to meet at the airport during the business trip, and had a meal together." I just nodded and said, "I know I'm not angry." It seemed that my reaction surprised her extremely. She looked at me in disbelief and asked, "Why aren't you jealous this time?" I said calmly, "It's nothing. I've seen it through." With that, I stood up, picked up my coat, and prepared to go out. Shen Xue-ning stepped forward again, blocking my way, and questioned, "Where are you going? What about my anniversary gift?" A month ago, I had bought a blue gem bracelet at an auction. Shen Xue-ning had also seen the news. Unexpectedly, I picked up my phone and transferred yuan to her, replying, "I forgot to prepare a gift. I've transferred money to you. Buy whatever you like." Shen Xue-ning immediately fell silent. During the 5-year marriage, I had carefully prepared gifts for her on every holiday without fail. She was stunned for a few seconds and then angrily grabbed my hand, asking, "What about that bracelet?" I gave a cold smile, looked at her hand and said, "What bracelet? Aren't you wearing a couple's bracelet with Song Rin?" Shen Xue-ning immediately looked embarrassed and stammered, "This. He gave it to me as a friend. Don't think too much. I'll take it off right away." Having lived together for 5 years, I was extremely familiar with her micro-expressions. From the way she unconsciously clutched the corner of her clothes, I could tell her nervousness. Since my heart was already dead, I really didn't want to waste more words with her. I pinched the bridge of my nose and turned around wearily to leave. Chapter 2. 5 years into our marriage, I had always put Shen Xue-ning first in everything. and it had been a long time since I had seen my old friends. I directly bought a plane ticket and flew to Hong Kong City to have a get-together with my good brothers. My brother Han Xingchen immediately arranged a dinner after receiving my call. After several rounds of drinking, everyone looked at me and almost said in unison, "We thought you would abandon your brothers after getting married. But does Shen Xue-ning know you're here?" I took a couple of sips of wine and smiled, replying, "Call me anytime from now on. There's no need to get her permission anymore." My phone screen kept flashing. Shen Xue-ning had called me more than a dozen times. Since Song Rin returned to the country, many times when Shen Xue-ning didn't come home at night, I was equally anxious, making calls to her. A few times, I asked her angrily why I couldn't reach her on the phone, and she replied impatiently, "Is the sky falling? I feel sick every time I see you call me continuously." Now she had become the one causing the nausea. We partied until late at night. As we were about to leave, Shen Xue-ning pushed the door open and walked in, looking travel-worn. She pulled out a chair and naturally sat beside me, snatching my wine glass and saying, "Even if you're in a bad mood, you can't drown your sorrows in alcohol. Don't you know about your stomach problems?" For a moment I was in a daze. Her sudden concern made me very uncomfortable. I raised my eyes and glanced at her coldly. "What are you doing here?" My brothers greeted her politely. After she smiled in response, she tightly grasped my hand and whispered, "You kept not answering my calls, so I had to come and find you." I shook off her hand with a look of displeasure and said coldly, "Shen Xue-ning, I've already said that I have nothing to do with you. Please stop making such overstepping moves." Seeing my firm attitude, Shen Xue-ning stared at me blankly. I directly pulled my brothers and walked around her. Shen Xue-ning ran out after us. She shouted behind me, "Fu Yan, I've come here on my own initiative to coax you. What else do you want me to do? You're almost 30. Do you have to disappear when we have a fight? Can you be more rational?" Shen Xue-ning directly got into the car and followed me back to Han Xingchen's home. In the car, she tried to pull me to talk again. I directly refused her. She became a bit angry and frustrated. "You've had enough of making a scene, and you've had enough to drink. Can you come home with me? I know you're jealous, but I really have nothing to do with Song Rin. Why do you have to hurt your own body like this?" I smiled and replied to her, "You're mistaken. I drank because I was happy to see my brothers. It has nothing to do with other things." After that, I directly pushed Shen Xue-ning away and went home with Han Xingchen. No matter how much she knocked on the door, I ignored her. That night I slept soundly. Chapter 3. Early the next morning, Han Xingchen knocked on my door and told me that Shen Xue-ning had come. After getting dressed and going downstairs, I saw Shen Xue-ning sitting at the dining table with a gloomy face, not saying a word. I knew she was angry. In the past, as long as she slightly frowned, I would rush to her side to coax her with eagerness. But this time, I walked away without looking back and directly hailed a taxi on the street. In the waiting lounge I met Shen Xue-ning again. She walked up to me, her tone full of anger. "Fu Yan, we were husband and wife. There's really no need for you to avoid me because of some trivial matters." I didn't even raise my head, typing on the keyboard and replying, "You're overthinking. I don't mean to avoid you." As soon as I finished speaking, the special follower notification sound on Shen Xue-ning's phone rang. After answering through the phone, I heard Song Rin say, "Where are you? Don't forget about tonight's banquet. Whether we can sign this deal depends on today." Since Song Rin returned to the country after getting divorced 3 years ago, Shen Xue-ning had secretly helped him a lot under the guise of me. Originally, I wanted to turn a blind eye and let it go, but seeing the upward curve of Shen Xue-ning's lips, I felt a sense of irony. She had never given me that gentle tone. Many times when she talked to me, it was in a business-like manner. I had proposed more than once that I hoped she could be gentler to me. Every time, she would reply impatiently, "The company's affairs are already giving me a headache. Can you stop making so many demands on me?" Thinking of this, I immediately lowered my head and edited 2 messages to my secretary, asking him to inform the business partners that Shen Xue-ning and I were in the process of getting a divorce. After she hung up the phone and turned to look at me, she immediately put away the sweet smile on her lips. "There are still things to deal with at the company. There are no tickets for the nearest flights. Give me your ticket. You wait for the next one." Seeing that I didn't move, Shen Xue-ning repeated what she had just said, but I responded coldly, "I didn't buy a ticket back to Jiangcheng." As soon as I finished speaking, Shen Xue-ning flew into a rage. "Fu Yan, so from the beginning to the end, you came to the airport just to act and show me that you're jealous, right? You're really childish." After saying that, Shen Xue-ning walked away angrily without looking back. I looked at Shen Xue-ning's departing back, and a sour feeling welled up in my heart. Whenever Song Rin called, no matter where Shen Xue-ning was, she would drop everything and rush to his side. Just like the Moments post he had made on New Year's Eve. The so-called preference means that no matter when, her first choice is you. Chapter 4. I didn't buy a ticket back to Jiangcheng, because my destination was Singapore. After taking over the Fu Group, the thing I most wanted to do was to enter the Songchal. and the land in the western suburbs was the most suitable location at present. Han Xingchen recommended a teacher to me, saying that he was his father's close friend. As long as I had a meal with him, I could learn a lot. We hit it off immediately. During the meal, the teacher helped me solve many current confusions. He liked me very much and proposed that I stay and study in his enterprise for half a year, saying that after half a year, I would surely be able to enter the Songchal smoothly and create my own world. Since the result was right in front of me, I had no reason to refuse. After the meal, before I could send the teacher back to his place of residence, Shen Xue-ning's calls came in one after another. I impatiently hung up many times until the teacher said, "Do you need to tell your family about your coming to Singapore?" The teacher must have seen the affectionate note I had for Shen Xue-ning. I shook my head and explained, "That's my former family. I've decided to get a divorce." After sending the teacher to his destination, I called Shen Xue-ning back. As soon as the call was connected, Shen Xue-ning directly asked me, "Fu Yan, what do you mean? Why did the business partners tell me today that they only want to talk to you about cooperation matters? What's going on? Haven't I been in charge of all the company's affairs, big and small, for the past few years? Do you know how important tonight's cooperation is to me?" Listening to her usual bossy tone, I couldn't help laughing. "So what?" As soon as I finished speaking, Song Rin's voice came from the other end of the phone. "Xue-ning, you must help me with this. I only have you." Shen Xue-ning gently comforted him beside her. "Don't worry. I'll take care of everything." Hearing this, I tightly clenched my fists and hit the steering wheel twice. A wave of hatred welled up in my heart. Shen Xue-ning kept explaining to me that there was nothing between them, yet she was soothing him tenderly right in front of me, as if no one else was around. I didn't know when Shen Xue-ning had put on this fake mask to face me. It was really disgusting. After coldly refusing, I directly hung up the phone and turned it off. Chapter 5. I stayed in Singapore for 2 days. Besides having tea and chatting with the teacher, and going through the entry formalities, I also found a place to live near the company. I asked my assistant to inform several business partners in advance of my plan to go abroad and thank them for their support over the past few years. There were no signs of Shen Xue-ning coming back at home. Everything was as usual. I took the opportunity to change the password of the front door. After resting for a day, the business partners took turns calling me to arrange a farewell banquet. I couldn't decline, so I had to attend. The door of the private room was ajar. I heard the voices of Song Rin chatting with the business partners. I was a bit suspicious. I never expected that a simple farewell banquet would also invite Shen Xue-ning and Song Rin. I was stunned for a few seconds, but still pushed the door open and walked in. Song Rin was sitting in the main seat, leaning against Shen Xue-ning. When Shen Xue-ning saw me, she looked up at me twice and said, "Everyone here today is a friend. Just sit wherever you like." There were some misunderstandings at the banquet last night. Now that everyone is here, we can just talk openly. The eyes of the business partners were all on me. Seeing that I had a gloomy face and didn't say a word, they didn't say anything either. Song Rin's eyes were filled with a sense of showing off. He smiled at me with a curl of his lips. I didn't want to sit next to them anyway, so I casually pulled out a chair and sat down. During the meal, Song Rin kept raising his glass to toast the business partners, talking loudly about the beautiful vision after the cooperation was signed. It could be seen that he was very happy tonight. My phone also kept flashing. Shen Xue-ning sent me several messages. "I'm going to announce something later. Give me some face. Any problems, we'll talk about them at home. You should be able to see today that there's nothing between me and Song Rin. There's nothing to hide from you." I kept reading until a new message popped up. "Song Rin will probably drink too much today. After it's over, I might have to send him home first." I raised my eyebrows and briefly replied with 2 words, "Whatever." After several rounds of drinking, seeing that the atmosphere was just right, Shen Xue-ning pulled Song Rin to stand up and toast, and announced, "From today on, Song Rin is the newly trained person in charge of our company. He will be in charge of communicating with you in the future. Please take care of him." At this time, the business partner closest to me asked with a puzzled look on his face, "Communicate? What communication?" "The Fu Group has already decided to withdraw from Jiangcheng. We've all made preparations to withdraw our capital. Who are you going to communicate with?" "What? Withdraw from Jiangcheng? Fu Yanyu?" Shen Xue-ning's face showed great shock. She suddenly turned her head to look at me. I nodded calmly. "Yes, I plan to move the Fu Group overseas." Shen Xue-ning's eyes widened, and her expression froze directly. "You're going to take the Fu Group overseas? Then what about me?" Chapter 6. I didn't want to expose it at first, thinking that I could finish this meal smoothly and draw a perfect end. But I didn't expect that Shen Xue-ning had called Song Rin for this purpose. What withdrawal of capital? Why don't I know about it? The business partner looked at me twice and continued to answer. "Didn't President Fu tell you? Today's meal is a farewell banquet. I don't know when we'll cooperate next time." Hearing this, Shen Xue-ning was so angry that she directly stood up and rushed in front of me, asking, Fu Yan, what does he mean? Are you really going abroad? I glanced at her twice, drained the wine in my glass, stood up and said, thank you all for your company over the past few years. We'll see each other again if we have the chance. After that I turned to leave. Shen Xue-ning, with red eyes, grabbed my hand and shouted, finish what you have to say before you leave. When did you make this decision? Why am I only finding out now? Her voice was trembling, mixed with anger and disbelief. I forcefully shook off her hand, suppressing my anger. Enough. It's not too late to know now. My tone was icy. Seeing my impatient look, Shen Xue-ning was so angry that she directly picked up the wine bottle beside her and smashed it towards my face. I couldn't dodge in time, and the bottle landed heavily on my head. In an instant blood gushed out. I fell straight down and was caught by Han Xingchen. Perhaps seeing my face covered in blood, Shen Xue-ning panicked and shouted hastily, quick, call an ambulance. My vision was blurred. When I closed my eyes, I could hear the nervous shouts around me, but my eyelids seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds, and I couldn't lift them. I held on until outside the operating room. When the doctor asked the family member to sign the operation consent form, I pulled the corner of Han Xingchen's clothes and shouted, You sign it. Shen Xue-ning angrily walked to the bedside. Fu Yan, clearly I'm your wife. In such an emergency, do you still want to make trouble with me? I gently waved my hand and replied, I'm not making trouble. In my heart, you've long been my ex-wife. Before I fell into a coma, I heard her hysterically shout with a trembling voice, I haven't agreed to the divorce yet, and I won't divorce you. Chapter 7. When I woke up again, I was lying in a hospital ward, receiving an intravenous drip. The white walls of the hospital hurt my eyes. Shen Xue-ning was holding my hand and sound asleep. Thinking of her scarlet-eyed and hurtful face from yesterday, I couldn't help shivering. She asked me sleepily, How are you? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Hearing her concerned tone, I looked at her suspiciously. Clearly, it was she who had hurt me like this yesterday, with an attitude that she wouldn't give up until I explained clearly. I forcefully shook off her hand and turned my head away, not wanting to say a word to her. But who would have thought that she would hold my face with a smile and say softly, Don't be angry. I was really overwhelmed by emotions last night and accidentally hurt you. I sneered and pushed her hand away again. Perhaps she didn't even notice that she still had the unique woody perfume smell from Song Rin on her body, which made me feel disgusted. As if seeing the disgust in my eyes, Shen Xue-ning said, Fu Yan, what on earth do you want me to do to go back to the way we were before? I really just went on a business trip. There's no need for you to make such a big fuss for so long, is there? Before, I always thought that since we were husband and wife, I should save some face. But during this period, Shen Xue-ning had trampled on my dignity time and time again, and I completely didn't want to endure it anymore. Shen Xue-ning's phone flashed twice. She looked at the messages and then sat on the bedside, smiling and holding my hand. She changed her tone and said, Can you call the business partners? Song Rin really wants this project. Let's talk about your going abroad later. Can you help him first? It's better not to involve others in our affairs. I didn't expect that after I had made things so clear that day, Shen Xue-ning still thought I was just jealous and throwing a tantrum. I frowned and replied indifferently, I won't make this call. If you want to help him, you can only rely on yourself. Just as Shen Xue-ning was about to get angry, my phone rang. The teacher asked me how my packing was going. I said that I had an accident and got injured, so I might have to postpone going for a week. The teacher gave me a few more instructions, and then hung up. Shen Xue-ning looked at me in shock and asked, You've arranged everything? You even booked the ticket? Her voice was trembling, mixed with a hint of fear. I came to my senses, and replied with a faint hum. My voice was distant and cold. Hearing this, Shen Xue-ning's face turned ashen. Fu Yan, we're husband and wife. Do you still remember that you promised me before that you would discuss anything with me? Why did you make such a big decision on your own this time? You didn't even discuss it with me. I forced a smile from between my lips and replied, You were busy accompanying Song Rin on business trips and social events some time ago. I didn't have the chance to inform you. Hearing her words, my heart was filled with mixed feelings. When we got engaged, we did promise to trust each other and discuss everything to solve problems. But since Song Rin came back, Shen Xue-ning often didn't come home at night and didn't allow me to ask too much. Every time, she would teach me with an unhappy face, I'm an adult. Do I have to report to you everywhere I go? Your control freak tendency is too strong, isn't it? Later, I could only learn about Shen Xue-ning's whereabouts from Song Rin's moments. I never expected that now, she would still use this promise to bind me without batting an eyelid. Just then, the delivery guy walked in with a bunch of sunflowers, which were my favorite flowers. Shen Xue-ning looked a bit embarrassed. I knew that this bunch of flowers wasn't from her. Coincidentally, Shen Xue-ning had always had a habit. Every time a relative or friend of hers was hospitalized, she would send them a bunch of flowers as a consolation. As soon as I woke up, I looked around the entire ward. As always, she didn't have this thought for me. After Shen Xue-ning took the flowers, She smiled awkwardly and said, Han Xingchen is quite thoughtful. My eyes welled up with sourness. The person I cherished like a treasure in the end wasn't as caring as my brother. How ridiculous. Chapter 8. I asked my assistant to bring the divorce agreement, wanting to settle the divorce matter before going abroad. The moment Shen Xue-ning took the divorce agreement, she was so angry that she directly tore it to pieces and threw it in my face. She didn't even open the terms to take a look. She said furiously, Fu Yan, being jealous is one thing, but I hold a lot of the company's core secrets. You'd better think carefully about the consequences before making a fuss about divorce. We've been married for 5 years. Some things can be worked out. I advise you to calm down for a while and then come to me. After saying that, she walked away without looking back. Looking at her angry back, I couldn't help but sigh. I really didn't know why I had been so crazy about chasing her back then. The first time I met Shen Xue-ning was on the day of the freshman's enrollment in college. She was standing at the school gate, looking hesitant in a white dress. I happened to pass by and was pulled by her. She asked me carefully if I could help her. Her suitcase was broken. I was attracted by the deep dimples on her lips. I, who was never very warm-hearted, even though I was in a hurry to go to the auditorium for a rehearsal that day, still helped her carry her luggage back to the dormitory without hesitation. She took out a bag of local specialties from her suitcase and gave it to me as a thank you, and also took the initiative to ask for my contact information. Later, we both joined the student union and gradually became familiar with each other. We would eat together, watch movies, and go to the library to study. I noticed that she often ate only vegetables when having a meal and was looking for part-time jobs outside the school not long after the semester started. I couldn't help asking if she had any difficulties in her life. At first, she didn't want to tell me about her real family situation. Later, not long after, she came to me crying, asking to borrow money, saying that her father had an accident and urgently needed surgery fees. I transferred the money to her without hesitation. Since then, I opened an attached card for Shen Xue-ning to make her life better. At first, Shen Xue-ning was reluctant to spend my money. It was not until later, when her father's injury was more serious, and she borrowed money from me twice more, that she started using my card. Perhaps even she herself had gotten used to my giving. So she became more and more unscrupulous, thinking that I would unconditionally help her with anything she did. I could see that Shen Xue-ning wouldn't divorce easily, but time was running out. In the evening, I received a call from the property management, saying that Shen Xue-ning couldn't get into the house, was making a big scene with them, and had even called a locksmith. A few days ago, I had told the property management not to allow Shen Xue-ning to enter my house again. I could hear Shen Xue-ning shouting on the other end of the phone. I'm the homeowner. Why can't I change the lock? You have no right to stop me. Hearing Shen Xue-ning's shrew-like tone, I helplessly rubbed my temples and decided to go back. I would communicate with her about the divorce again. By the way. When I arrived at the door, the police had already arrived. I was the one who called the police. When Shen Xue-ning saw me coming back, she emotionally grabbed my wrist to prove herself. He's my husband. We just had some conflicts recently. He secretly changed the password. He's been injured and hospitalized these 2 days. I didn't want to disturb him, so I called a locksmith to change the lock. I frowned and interrupted her impatiently. We're already in the process of getting a divorce. We're not husband and wife anymore. You have no right to enter my house again, let alone change the lock without permission. As soon as I finished speaking, Shen Xue-ning flew into a rage. This house is marital property. I have half of it. You have no right to drive me out without saying a word. Have you forgotten the promise you made to me when you proposed? You said everything you had was mine. I shook my head helplessly. Shen Xue-ning, I hope you can understand that I was willing to give you everything because I loved you. But no one will tolerate your cheating again and still love you. After saying the last word, Shen Xue-ning's eyes turned red with anger. She grabbed the corner of my clothes and shouted, I don't care. This is my home. Open the door immediately. I want to go home and get my things. Originally, I really wanted to make an appointment for her to go back and clean up her things. Since it happened to be the right time, I agreed. But who would have thought that after she went home, she directly locked herself in the room and didn't move. I was a bit angry and knocked on the door to remind her. I'll give you 3 hours. I have to go back to the hospital. Hurry up and pack and move out. I quietly sat on the sofa. An hour later, the doorbell at the door rang. I struggled to get up from the sofa and opened the door to see Song Rin's face. He was holding a transparent bag in his hand, in which there was a pink rabbit ear pajamas. He looked behind me and asked, Is Xue-ning back? I saw the faintly visible pink mark on Song Rin's neck and was too lazy to respond. I was about to close the door, but he leaned forward and reached out to stop me. I suppressed my anger and asked him, What do you want? Song Rin smiled and handed me the bag, saying, This was left in my suitcase by Xue-ning a few days ago. I was afraid she couldn't find it, so I dropped it off on my way today. Even though I had decided to completely end things with Shen Xue-ning, Seeing that she had left her underwear in another man's suitcase still made me feel a twinge of discomfort. I pointed behind me and said, "She's in the room. You can go up and take her away now and have a tender moment." At this point, his proud expression froze slightly, and a look of guilt flashed in his eyes. But he quickly regained his calm. "Fu Yan, don't misunderstand. It's not what you think between me and Xue-ning." As soon as he finished speaking, I pushed him away. "I'm going back to the hospital first. Take her away quickly." The moment the door closed, Shen Xue-ning rushed over and shouted at me in a flurry. "Do you have to be so mean? I've already explained that there's nothing between me and Song Rin. Why are you always so aggressive? Fu Yan, when you're discharged from the hospital, we have to have a good talk." The door closed with a bang. I pursed my lips tightly and said nothing. I hailed a taxi on the roadside, reported the address of the hospital, and closed my eyes wearily. Chapter 9. I stayed in the hospital for another 3 days. To my great surprise, Shen Xue-ning started driving 40 minutes to the hospital every day to accompany me these 2 days. She would stay for a whole day and leave at sunset. I told her to leave, but she refused. "Fu Yan, I'm doing this to make you understand that you're really in my heart. I don't want to separate from you. I hope you can reconsider going abroad." I called her crazy and said she didn't understand me, but Shen Xue-ning still did as she pleased. To stop her, I tried to communicate with the hospital to refuse her visit, but the nurse told me that Shen Xue-ning didn't make a scene in the hospital, and she could visit me at any time. I arranged 2 security guards to stand guard outside the door. When she saw she couldn't get in, she directly called the police. After showing the police our marriage certificate, the police persuaded us a few words and told us not to waste public resources. I was so tired that I decided to give up the struggle and focus on getting better. Shen Xue-ning mistakenly thought that I was going to change my mind. After that, she even tried to show me her kindness crazily. Chapter 10. In order to go to Singapore in time, I went through the discharge procedures on the evening of the 6th day. Shen Xue-ning happened to have something to tell me and said she would come to the hospital later that day. After returning home, I was busy packing my luggage and didn't notice that my phone was flashing all the time. It was not until Shen Xue-ning knocked on the door angrily that I realized it was getting late. I directly opened the door and pushed 3 large suitcases in front of Shen Xue-ning. Shen Xue-ning looked at me in astonishment and asked, "What do you mean?" I replied coldly, "Your clothes are all packed. Take them away." Shen Xue-ning looked embarrassed and stammered, You went into my cloakroom?" I sneered twice and pointed to the suitcase. "I put your wooden box in there." In the 5-year marriage, I had never entered Shen Xue-ning's cloakroom. I never knew that she would put the wooden box in such a conspicuous place. Inside the box was a yellow diary, recording 18-year-old Shen Xue-ning's throbbing for Song Rin. Every word was full of deep affection. There was also a profile photo of Song Rin in the diary, which showed that it had been carefully preserved. Seeing my gloomy face, Shen Xue-ning hurriedly explained, "Don't misunderstand. I haven't opened that wooden box since I put it there. I and Song Rin don't." "Enough, Shen Xue-ning. I don't want to hear another word about you and Song Rin." I directly pushed Shen Xue-ning and the 3 suitcases out. That night, Shen Xue-ning didn't leave, and I sat in front of the French window, staring at the moonlight all night. Looking at her downstairs, I kept thinking about when things between us had started to change. Maybe it was when we first took a fancy to the same watch as Song Rin. Shen Xue-ning told me the day before that she had bought that limited edition watch from Maison Margiela. But when she came back from a business trip the next day, she told me she didn't buy it. Under my questioning, she said impatiently, "I made a mistake yesterday. I really didn't buy it." But why did that watch later appear on Song Lin's wrist? At the opening ceremony of his company, many people praised his extraordinary strength for getting such a hard-to-buy watch. Shen Xue-ning probably thought I didn't know all this. But since the day I decided to separate from her, I had been sending people to investigate. Although I had prepared myself mentally, when those evidences were placed in front of me, my heart still ached uncontrollably for a long time. At this moment, I suddenly felt very lucky that Shen Xue-ning and I didn't have a child. In these 5 years, the topic of children was always inevitable at parties. Shen Xue-ning always said that I was too busy with work, and we hadn't considered it yet. In front of so many people, I always gave her face and echoed that it was indeed my problem. But Shen Xue-ning knew that it was she who had been refusing to have a child with me. It was written in the diary that she only wanted to have a child for one person in her life. I knew that after all, I wasn't worthy. Chapter 11. Before going out, I asked the security guards to ask Shen Xue-ning, who had been sitting there all night, to leave. When the car passed the security room, our eyes met. At this moment, I suddenly realized that the girl whose every frown and smile could once affect my mood now looked haggard. And I didn't feel a bit of heartache for her. So this was the feeling of not loving anymore. Before the plane took off, I gave Shen Xue-ning a big gift. I asked my assistant to send her all the things I had investigated about Song Rin recently, including that Song Rin had been flirting with 2 other women since he returned to Jiangcheng. Song Rin had always told Shen Xue-ning that he got divorced because of his ex-wife's infidelity. But it wasn't his ex-wife who was unfaithful. Song Rin had been using Shen Xue-ning all along, step by step making her willing to open a company for him, attract business, and even offer herself. I had a video call with Song Rin's ex-wife. She gave me a lot of evidence. She had only one request, which was to see Song Rin get the punishment he deserved. As the saying goes, if you don't want others to know, don't do it. Song Rin's company's accounts have been very problematic in the past 2 years. I directly reported him, and also sued to recover the money that Shen Xue-ning had spent on opening a company for him with my money. After flying for more than 10 hours, when I turned on my phone again, there were a lot of unread messages. Most of them were from Shen Xue-ning. I didn't reply to any of her messages. It was all over. Calculating the time, Shen Xue-ning should have finished reading the evidence, and also received the court summons. Since Shen Xue-ning didn't want to sign, I could only bring the divorce matter to court. I successfully joined the teacher's company. 1 month later, the divorce case between Shen Xue-ning and me was going to be heard in court. I had to go back again. On the day of the court session, I saw Shen Xue-ning with sunken eyes and a gloomy look. In just 1 month, I almost didn't recognize her. The moment she saw me, Shen Xue-ning was very emotional, and there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She shouted at me, "Fu Yan." I calmly raised my eyes. The bottomless cold in my eyes made her heart tighten, and she didn't finish the rest of her words. Because the evidence provided by our side was sufficient, the court directly ruled that Shen Xue-ning would leave the marriage with nothing. After Song Rin was arrested for tax evasion, he directly pushed the compensation matter to Shen Xue-ning. After hearing the court's judgment, Shen Xue-ning completely collapsed in her seat. Before leaving, I glanced at her. Her face was deathly pale. As I expected, she still called out to stop me. "Fu Yan, can you not ask for that money? You know I can't afford so much." The always proud Shen Xue-ning actually had a day of pleading so humbly. I still remember that in the first year after we got married, she had a big fight in a beauty salon. Just because a woman accidentally stepped on her new shoes, she demanded that the woman apologize to her in public and compensate her. After I received her call to support her, I directly bought that beauty salon as she asked. At that time, I doted on Shen Xue-ning extremely. Even if the friends around me who knew the situation said that I had become a bit unreasonable, I didn't care. I only thought of Shen Xue-ning's goodness in my heart. As long as she asked, even if she wanted the stars in the sky, I would try my best to buy a ladder for her. But now, when I heard her pleading, I didn't even want to turn back. "Fu Yan, can you help me?" Seeing that I didn't speak, she continued. I interrupted her. "Shen Xue-ning, compared to the harm you've done to me in recent years, this is nothing." Her voice trembled as she defended. "Fu Yan, I know I was wrong, very wrong. But I really love you. You have to believe me." At this point, I didn't know that Shen Xue-ning could still say the word love to me. How ironic. She chose to betray me, because the man hidden in her heart came back. Because she couldn't afford to pay back the money she owed me. She hypocritically tried to keep me, and said she loved me. I didn't know what else Shen Xue-ning couldn't say or do. My heart sank to the bottom of the ice. I shook my head, sighed, and left straight away. After coming out, looking at the clear sky, I couldn't help sighing. The 5-year marriage finally came to an end on this day. Han Xingchen had a video call with me on the night I arrived in Singapore. He asked me, "Do you regret it?" I knew what he meant. The Fu Group was the hard work left to me by my parents. My decision to withdraw from Jiangqing resolutely was indeed a shocking decision to everyone. But they were wrong. I didn't leave because of Shen Xue-ning. My infatuation had woken up a long time ago. I really wanted to make the foundation left to me by my parents better and go further. Half a year later, I opened a new company in Singapore. On the opening day, I saw Shen Xue-ning's figure at the end of the crowd. In these 6 months, Shen Xue-ning hadn't paid back a single cent. I knew that this was the limit of her ability. I didn't force her either. I always thought that something was better than nothing. Although as long as Shen Xue-ning didn't pay off the money, I would have to keep in intermittent contact with her. Every time I received her transfer message, I would sigh. In the long flow of time, there are always 1 or 2 people who push you forward and force you to grow. After the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I didn't walk up to Shen Xue-ning to say hello. Standing beside me at this moment was the teacher's daughter. It was she who had accompanied me to get familiar with the streets and alleys of Singapore in these 6 months. It was she who rushed to my side every time I was frustrated and told me to be brave. I remember that she said the same thing to me many times when I was drunk. "You have to believe that you're a very good person." After the marriage with Shen Xue-ning ended, I did close my heart. When I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, she appeared in time and brought me a lot of happiness. I took her hand and knelt down on one knee in front of everyone, taking out a diamond ring from my pocket. It was customized by her favorite niche designer a month ago. I promised her that I would give her an answer on the opening day of the company. I didn't want to break my promise. I didn't want to lose a girl who loved me wholeheartedly. She was so excited that she burst into tears and nodded, saying, "I do." Shen Xue-ning behind the crowd also had red eyes. I knew that she had been secretly visiting my dynamic, but I couldn't give her any response. What I had to do was to walk the rest of my life more steadily and wonderfully. My new girlfriend and I hugged each other warmly in the applause of everyone. I whispered in her ear, "Thank you for appearing in my life." As soon as I finished speaking, Shen Xue-ning turned around, wiped her tears and left. This time, I didn't even want to say the word goodbye to her softly. I hoped that in the long years, we would never see each other again.